still hard not to feel anything about cutting up old work. I build a lot of things more than once, and I guess not everyone gets that. The plain fact is that revising designs increases my personal satisfaction, but it really does come at the expense of forward progress. Really, I'm just better now at designing and welding than when I started this whole thing, and so as my skills develop, I do like to make the occasional tweak. In this case, this will be the fourth, and oh boy, I do promise, the last set of engine mounts for the car. How do I know that? Well, because I am burning these suckers in, committed all the way. Hey y'all. So we're gonna build some engine mounts, and as you may notice, there are already engine mounts in the car, but as you guys know, I have a new idea come into my head, and these just don't work for that anymore, so I'm gonna cut them out and I'm gonna start over. Like I said, I did build engine mounts, but they're way over the top. Neat, fun, wonderful welding project, but they're bulky. They take up way too much space, and for a car that's going to have a pretty complicated header design, I need to make these a lot more compact, and I've got a chance to make stuff lighter. So the new design, which we'll talk about in a minute, is going to use a lot of chromoly and plate steel and all that, and I've started with putting together the new frame side plates. And the first part I've got to do is make sure that I understand exactly where the center of these are so that I can mount the new plates where they need to be on the frame, quite frankly. Now, while I don't like the bulk of these old mounts, they were placed correctly, and it was important to preserve that location index and transfer to the new set of mounts. Small Sharpies are my jam for precise marking. In terms of exactitude, a fresh fine point Sharpie is one step shy of using a scribe and layout fluid. And again, pinky promise, this is the last time I'm doing this. Now this is the rough dimension, right? I'm not gonna say that each of these plates is perfectly identical, but what I am gonna do is I'm gonna pick the driver's side as the go-by. That is the absolute gospel number, and whatever I measure that to be, I'm gonna make this side match, and I'm gonna do it from a known constant, which is this chassis piece right here. It's still hard not to feel anything about cutting up old work. Let's get naked. Do y'all remember when I said building a car would fold you up into tight spots? Well, take a look at this pretzel. The Sawzall has always been my friend, but it was vibrating the car pretty good. In fact, Chris snagged this old engine mount from falling on my head, so I guess it's time to switch to the grinder. And thanks, Chris. That would have been an interesting day. A little bit to repair, but not a ton. See what I'm talking about? Looks like just a plate, right? Look at all those weld inches. I enjoyed every minute of that. That was a whole bunch of fun. But this is stupid heavy. Before I put those new mounts in place and get them all tacked, I want to clean up the last bits of the old and get this frame rail nice and clean. I'm using a fresh 60 grit 3M Cubitron roll lock on my favorite die grinder. I just need a clean and workable finish. This might legitimately seem like overkill, taking a few minutes to clean off the surface rust, but I strongly prefer having a completely clean work area. So that's all cut out. Ridiculousness. So that's all cut out and smooth, and while I want to go next and pop these guys into place, obviously I got to blend those. Really, the thing that I'm most concerned about now, and I think we're going to run into a problem on these too, is this is going to sit above the frame rail just a little bit, right, to get the whole mounting system up and out of the way of exhaust and other things are going to run under the engine oil pan. Before we do that, I want to make sure that this is not going to interfere with the suspension at all. So let's go dig through the suspension boxes and find one A-arm A piece of detail I have really come to appreciate from the Chassis Works people is how well everything is packaged and labeled. It's real pride in their work.
We're going to mount it in here. This is the Chris Alston's Chassis Works. This is where the mount goes. Passenger A-arm. Yeah, but the hardware doesn't care. This is upper control arm G Street wide track bolt. And we just want to make sure that that upper A-arm isn't gonna, the hardware for it anyway, isn't gonna conflict with the engine mounts. So all what we need here to make sure this is gonna fit, we will need that amount of clearance. Whatever this is, looks like maybe 2 inches. That, but this is where Chris tells me I need to buy my own profiler tool. But I'm going to take a profile of this frame rail, and I'm going to see if I can transfer that to the new engine mount. Because we got a pretty good idea of with the tooling and how far that's got to go backwards. And the new mount will actually, with a little bit of a trim, kind of slip right under that. But it's this is my niece did all of this. So that's the line that we're gonna try and trim for. Yeah, little daylight, not much.
I would normally suggest pulling a pattern from the side you're working on, but I chose a while back that the passenger side would be the dimensional go-by for this particular sub-project.
So there's a choice as to which one of these we use. I do have them set up to where this is supposed to be that side. It's not all that big a deal. We're building a triangular structure. It's going to go from one end to the other. Perhaps you should mark it in the middle, David. Little things like that when I'm thinking ahead to the next thing and I don't pay real close attention. You'd think I'd learned that lesson by now.
I marked the center from the profile and just lined everything up and transferred the curve to the work.
Mounted about like that. And it's not straight up and down, which was my original design. I originally wanted to put these things like the hardware straight up and down and have all this sticking out. But
that doesn't matter.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. All that matters to me anyway is, see this center line, this is where the engine mount. That's where the engine mount goes. This is also from Chassis Works. And this engine mount, just very, very quickly, this is their like way offset engine mount that's supposed to sit like that. It's meant for when people swap in LSs and small blocks. And the LS engine is like, I don't know, 1.5-inch-ish shorter. So you got to push the bell housing backwards. Well, I just flip that sucker around. And that lets me push the engine backwards, which if you'll recall, my LS is set back. It's either 12 or 14 inches, I don't remember, but a lot for this car anyway. And this center line would sit right here. And if I have it at an angle like that, that actually creates more room for tooling, right? Because it lets me turn the tooling. Lets me do this number. Right, so I can have more room for tooling. That's pretty nice. And it kicks forward this lower part, this part right here, which I designed to have one of the mounts on it, to come straight up to this guy. And that's really what we're trying to build here, is almost like it's almost like a truss, you know, like on the top of the building, it's all triangles. And before long, I'm gonna have to blend these welds. I can't keep putting it off. So that's about it. Let's see if it fits. You can see we got still a little bit of gap there just at the edges. But, you know, honestly, I'd kind of like that.
You took this spine, and just made this spine run longitudinal with the car.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Tight fit up is critical for a good TIG weld, so this is only partially my OCD coming out.
It's hard to see on camera, but that's one Higgs boson right there. So we're going to shave that down.
I wanted y'all to see what working these problems was like in near real time. Personally, like, you know, when the camera's away, I just stare at stuff and let my imagination wander, but
That's a good fit.
well, that does not make for awesome video, so I'm verbalizing some of that inner dialogue here.
So by doing that too, the way that this angle works out, like linearly, it creates a whole bunch of room over here for tooling. Any daylight over here? Nope. Nope, not really.
Not enough to care about.
Not enough to care about, that's right. I want to get it angled up. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. tack here on the back. And no, I'm not going to do any of that because I have to blend these welds. I'm going to have to blend these welds. I can't keep putting it off. That's a lot of build up and no payoff. So. I mean, just got to get a tack, but, you know, somewhat committing.
David.
Yeah,
make this easier on you.
What?
Make it.
That's. I feel triggered. If I MIG'd it, I couldn't use all these neat little toys.
Look, depending on who you ask, TIG welding is either the apex of welding skill or just a great way to overinvest labor hours in a build.
It's a lot of post flow for a little tack. I love these guys that turn on and off. So handy. All right, now let's look at it from the overhead view like you were talking about. It's not quite square, but it's got a useful inward angle. It actually might be squared up, and I just can't tell because that hardware's in the way. But see, now that I can see,
Where's
I know.
your nerd ruler? Over here?
Are you talking about my little one that goes in tenths? So we checked with the nerd ruler. Did you get that on camera, the nerd ruler? Where's your nerd ruler? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. It measures it in tenths. Right?
Measures the imperial system in base 10. It's almost like it's American metric.
It's trying its best to be American metric. That's actually, when you do that, when you learn to draw, that's what you learn in, is base 10 inches. You don't think in like, oh, it's a quarter of an inch. If you do that, you're just going to get hit in the face by your, drafting instructor. The only thing is that I'm going to say that this is really flat to the bottom of the frame rail, which is what I was actually going for in this whole redesign, so that it doesn't dip down to, hang on, let me turn this sucker off. So this carries the front suspension. It does a lot of work, this front cross member. It's got the lower control arm mounts. It's got the steering, the rack mounts. There's a lot of stuff going on in here, but you see this bend up, how this flows? These guys, the ones that I made before, bulky, all kinds of in the way. Now, this all sits up high enough that we can actually do some tubular reinforcement here and then tie it all the way back to the chassis and still leave room for all the exhaust that has to go under the oil pan. Which that should be your first hint as to the amount of exhaust that's going to fit under here.
Tying the front suspension crossmember back to the torque box area of the frame is actually something I first saw on an old Subaru STI that I had back in the day. It's pretty common on modern unibody cars these days. Man, I loved that car.
I write dimensions on stuff because I cannot remember them.
And what's the actual dimension here?
3.1. That's 3. So that's 3. So we need to go back a tenth, not a quarter, not an eighth, but a tenth. I'm not waiting for a 10-second post flow on attack. Let me go get the shark with a frickin' laser beam attached to it.
To get the driver's side in the exact same place, I centered a laser on the chassis and passed a lateral line through a bolt hole on the already set up passenger side. That same line would pass directly through the driver's side, and I would verify the orientation of the plate with my angle finder. Now it's not perfect, but it's about as close as I think I can practically get here in the shop. So altogether, this method set and verified the alignment of the bracket to the frame and put both mounts parallel to one another.
That's getting within the error bars. The other thing that I can do, I can mark this, I can trim it, and I can put it right back on. Now the front corner's fine, it's the back that's pinching.
Oh, okay.
See right here?
That's
You want to hear the most annoying sound in the world? Yeah, that's good. We're down to basically within the error range of this gauge. So I don't trust that gauge below 0.2 of a degree.
And just to clarify very quickly, 70 degrees is just 20 degrees in the opposite direction. For this part of the project, having the plates mirrored within 0.2 of a degree is more than good. The rest of the mounts that tie up to the engine are not interchangeable and will not be a mirror image of one another. From here, it is arts and crafts. I'm talking 100% cardboard-aided drafting. And you'll get to see the realization of the design I've had rattling around in my head for these couple of months.
You can see we're gonna trim off a little, which I left extra on this part on purpose. This is where we ballpark it.
To give you some context for time invested, we shot the main part of this video, basically everything that you've seen up to this point, in one afternoon. The rest of what I'll call the finish out took me a few afternoons and early mornings.
So that's gonna be a nice weld seam right there. I think I can just trim that. Kind of see where we're going. I don't know. Kind of makes me think of an F-117, stealth bomber from way back. Yeah.
Yes, radar will never pick up your motor mounts now.
Gonna have the cross section of a wee small bird.
From building out the rest of the shape to tacking it all in place to steadily welding it in without overheating the frame, I think I spent the equivalent of maybe a full weekend on these. We spent a lot of time on this frame, and if you want a detailed look at how I built this chassis, check the links in the description or even the playlist here at the end of the video. And now, knowing it was going to be a few weeks before I could return to this project, I wiped the new steel down with Seymour's penetrant fluid. It's a light mineral-based lubricant that does a very nice job protecting bare steel for what I'll call short to medium periods of time. It'll all be here and ready for the next work session. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, take care.